Welcome to the Infinite Wealth Podcast. I'm Cameron Christensen, along with my co-host Anthony Faso. And today we've got a guest that is back by popular demand, Ken Gronbach. Ken, welcome back to the show, man. We're excited to have you today.
Yeah. I like being here.
So we like having you here, and our
Yeah.
listeners like having you here too. We went back through and started looking at some of our most popular episodes, and you were at the top. That's why we reached back out to you to get you back here.
Yeah. I
Well,
make most of this stuff up.
yeah. So do we,
That's what this
right?
guy does. Yeah.
So, what was interesting, I remember when Cameron came to me, what we just had a coaching session where I was kind of teaching him how infinite banking and kind of teaching some personal development. And he was reading your book, and he wanted to, recommend we have you on the podcast. And I would say, to be honest, Ken, I wasn't so sure how it would relate to kind of the content that we have, because we deal with a lot of business owners and real estate investors. But we had you on, and that was literally one of my favorite episodes. I felt that it was like there was part that information that we could use and implement, and part of it was very interesting, like a documentary. You shared some interesting facts, so I really enjoyed it. You did scare me a little bit a few times. I remember you told me Texas was going blue. That has stuck in my head. So I'm looking forward to catching up, seeing what if you're changing your mind about Texas, but really kind of learning how we can use some of the demographics to make better financial decisions. So this is going to be fun.
Wow, that was a long way to say. Long way to say Cameron was right. That's what I heard there, Ken.
Yeah.
Ken,
It ain't easy.
Ken, for our listeners, right, that are new, right? Our listener base has grown quite substantially over the years. Give a little background. What is a demographer? And you also have a futurist in your title. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, demographers are people that count people. And people think I make maps. That's cartographer. I'm a demographer. And there aren't many of us. In fact, if you go on to Google and you Google Ken demographics, see what comes up, me, wall to wall, because there aren't any other. I think there's probably maybe 100 in the world, and I'm not even sure of that. Demographers count live births, demographers count deaths, demographers count migration, and demographers count aging. Aging is very, very important. And a population of 1 million compared to another population of 1 million cannot be compared like that. That you have to take so many things into consideration. You have to take ethnicity into consideration and age. Right now, we have China, like 9 years ahead of schedule, has gone from being an aging country to an age-ed country. And that means that more people are dying than are being born, which means their population is shrinking because they don't do immigration because they're xenophobic. They just don't do it. Futurist. If I look at, and let's use China again. If you look at China's one-child only policy that was put in place in 1979 at the suggestion, I think, of Henry Kissinger. I don't know if he was trying to sabotage him or not, but it's the largest demographic blunder in the history of the world, the one-child only policy, because now under 40 years old, they're literally missing 500 million people, 500 million, which means they have no labor. So can I forecast what's going to happen to China? Yes, they don't have labor, which means they don't have parents. And if you don't have parents, you're not going to have a ton of kids because you need parents. So what's going to happen to China? China's going to fall into economic chaos, and their population is going to fall from 1.4 billion to 700 million. You can't do that. You simply cannot do that. So, which is why everything about China that was put in place in the last 40, 50 years is probably going to be reversed. I mean, they produce 30% of the products that are produced in the world. They're the world's manufacturer. Well, guess what? No longer. Can't do it. Where's it going to go? It's coming to the Americas.
Awesome.
Cool.
Man, yeah, I appreciate that. You're giving some good nuggets already. I've got kind of two other questions for you before we dive into the good stuff. Last time we talked a lot about generations and kind of different age groups. Would you mind giving our listeners maybe just a brief introduction to that, so when we reference them later, they can follow along?
Okay. Well, let's go all the way back to GI generation, born 1905 to 1924. It was a huge generation because of immigration. We had 14 million people that came to the country in that period. So it was a huge generation, and those were the guys, the men and women that fought in World War II. Next generation is called the silent generation, 1925 to 1944. Tiny, 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 tiny. And why? Because they had very few parents. And why? Because of a plague in the 1800s. Next generation, and the one that we're concerned with now, and the one that I'm in, and then the one that former President Trump is in, are the baby boomers. And the baby boomers were born 1945 to 1964, and they were about, give or take, 78 to 80 million of them. And it's a huge, huge population. Didn't do a great deal with immigration, but it didn't really need to, because it provided the United States with the labor force that it needed. Then you have a generation born 65 to 84 called Generation X. Now, Generation X is literally a problem.
Huh?
We're not happy with you,
What?
Anthony.
Nobody
Yeah,
talks about Generation X.
No, no,
Like,
Problem child.
it's because Generation
Just
X has 9 million fewer people than the baby boomers. You're about 11 or 12% smaller than the baby boomers. And what that does is it wipes out retail. It wipes out any kind of consumption. So you're an issue. 1985.
Well, now, wait a minute. So we got to pause here. If I'm Gen X, you're making fun of me? Are you telling me you're millennial?
No, I'm just a late.
Okay,
I'm a
all
late
right.
Gen X. I'm 80.
All right.
I'm
You're
80.
just making fun of me, period.
I'm 80.
Okay.
I'm 80. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, but
Sorry, Ken.
You guys literally could not provide the labor necessary for the baby boomer consumption. And so what you did is you sucked in millions, tens of millions of Latinos from Mexico, Central and South America. And if without them, the United States wouldn't be a country in 2050. So we need them, absolutely. Next generation after you guys is Generation Y millennials, 85 to 2004. They're huge. There's 88 million of them, but there are 88 million of them because of the contribution of the Latinos. And Latinos are literally, people of color are literally outproducing white people under 20 years old right now. 20 and under, we're a majority nation. The next generation, which is not fully born yet, is
Sorry, Ken. When you say outproducing, are you talking about children, or are you talking about like
children.
Okay,
Okay,
gotcha.
right.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. Or keep in mind that everything to a demographer is fertility.
Okay.
We talk how many babies are being born. You need to have 2.2 to replace yourself. 2.2. I've never seen a 0.2 myself personally, but generation born 205, 2005 to 24, which is still being born, should be about 70 million, maybe 80 million. We're not sure. We're looking at it. And they're a very unusual generation. And one of the things about that generation, that last generation, Generation Z, is they are tending toward jobs in the technical fields like heating, ventilation, air conditioning, plumbing, electrician, auto technician. They're not going to college. And certainly the men are not going to college, which is why you have so many, the women outnumber men in college, and women really outnumber men in law school, about 75-25. It's an interesting time. So
it's very, very interesting. Perfect. Great. Thanks for giving us an overview of that. Before we dive into specific examples, can you give us maybe a generic example or two? I'm thinking of some in your book of how demographics has influenced our economy over the years.
Well, you Gen Xers are the problem, because when we discovered, and I discovered this in 1996. 1996, it was Clinton versus Dole, and there was a full-page editorial in the local paper in Connecticut, the Hartford Courant, that said that your generation were a bunch of lazy, slacker couch potatoes, and that you were not involving yourself in the political process. You were not running for office. You were not voting. You were not giving money, and you were not giving time to the political process. And what was the future of the United States if you were the future? And so I had 40 people working for me at the time, and 30 of them were Xers, and I didn't have any lazy people. So I called in a research department, which is one guy. And I said, go find out everything you can about Generation X. And he came back to me a few days later and said, Generation X will never perform at the level of the boomers. And I said, really? I said, because they're lazy. And he said, no, because there's fewer of them, 9 million fewer of them, about 12% smaller. And I said, we have a hole in our population? And he said, yes. I said, does anybody know it? And he said, I couldn't find any research on it. He said, people just don't think about it. People don't think about people. People think about money, but they don't. Those two are very related. So what we did is we went back and looked at what you guys did. When you shut down maternity wards, you shut down the toy industry, you shut down about 30% of the public schools, you shut down bicycles, you shut down Japanese motorcycles, you crushed them. You shut down, almost shut down Detroit. You just simply did not buy the same number of the highly profitable SUV vehicles that the boomers bought. And in 2008, you shut down housing. So there. Does it affect the economy? You betcha. When you don't have enough consumers, you don't have much stuff consumed. Period.
That does make now why is Generation X so smaller when the baby boomers were larger?
They had more parents. Baby boomers had the GI generation, the people that fought in World War II, as parents. When the guys came back from World War II, 1945, they cranked out kids like crazy. And that was the baby boomers. And they cranked them out for 20 years. Your particular generation, Gen X, was precipitated from a group that was born 1925 to 1944, and they were tiny. It was only 50 million people. It was actually, in terms of the baby boomers, it was like almost 30 million fewer people to be parents.
Okay, so as far as the generations go, it kind of like the millennials' parents aren't the previous generation, right?
No.
It's the one before that. So that's why there's a gap.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Okay. So then that would mean if we were to forecast going forward, the Gen X will produce I don't know what they're going to call. I've heard Gen Alpha or whatever this next one's going to be. But what I'm hearing is we have a big generation, then a smaller one, and that it's going to continue because of the different sizes.
Yeah, it is. Your generation, which is relatively small, but keep in mind, your generation was augmented by Latinos. Augmented, which means tons and tons and tons of very fertile Latinos came to the United States, and they're having children that the Gen X generation would be having just because they're the same age. Now what's happening now is we're watching Generation Z come along, and we think it's going to be okay. The problem is Generation Y millennials are not having kids. And that's long term. That's going to be very devastating for the United States, but it's long term. It's I'll be dead, and so I don't care.
Kenny, you'd mentioned that Generation X ruined the housing market in 08. You mind expanding on that?
Well, if what's the housing market? It's a retail market, yes. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a retail market and you lose, and there's an age when people buy houses. I mean, people, you start thinking about a house in your 30s and certainly in your 40s. When your generation hit that or thereabouts, you were 12% smaller. So 12% can wreck a market. Most profit that's made by retail is 5% after tax. 5% after tax. What does that mean? It means the last 5 people out of 100 that walk into your establishment or that you sell to are your profit. I mean, it's a very simple concept. So when you have a smaller generation like Generation X going through the system, wherever you go, and the Latinos are not advanced socioeconomically yet, but they will be. They're amazing, and their kids will be. Obviously, look at Cameron. The kids, assimilate, become part of our culture, and get education and buy and consume. Generation X was small. When you have a smaller number of people, you consume less in comparison to the generation before you, which was the baby boomers, which was huge. I mean, no offense. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings.
Don't cry on us.
In there.
Don't
You're in
cry.
there.
Don't cry us. No, but I'm on the bigger part of that small group. But
when were you
and
born,
then-
Cameron? Cameron,
What?
when were you born?
I was born 1980.
Okay, the bottom of the hole was somewhere in the late 70s, so you're not far from the bottom.
Cameron's not far from the bottom of the hole.
Hey, as
Got
long
it.
as I'm not the bottom, we're all in good shape. And then to what you had mentioned just a minute ago, Ken, as you said, Gen X was about 70 million, Gen Y was like 100 million, and then you said Z,
88.
and then Z you said there's some hope for them, or 88 million. You said Z, there's some hope for them, but they're lagging on production, right? Which is kids. Is that because of the economic situation, right? Is it tough for these guys to move? What is it?
Well, I'll give you an example, and you you may want to cut this part, but there's a reason.
We're
for
live. Let's go.
it. Well, there's 150 million people born every year in the world. 150 million. Okay, 60 million people die in the world every year. 60 million people are aborted every year. Okay, won't go there. Of the 150 million people that are born, half of them are unintentional. That's what statistics shows. Unintentional. Why? Because it's fun to make babies. It's a lot of fun to make babies, and that's obvious. It's why if it wasn't fun, we wouldn't make babies.
That's a good point.
Okay, but what's happening? The fun part. The fun part has found a substitute, and the substitute is the internet, because 1/3 of the internet is a substitute for making babies, and computers don't have them. That's what's happening, and it's happening worldwide.
Wow.
Sorry, guys.
I'm thinking of two things. One is like specific sites, or is it like social media, just phones in general that are?
I think it's talking about
No, it's pornography.
porn sites.
Okay. All right.
Porn sites.
Man,
It's a third of the internet. A third.
What? Well, we can get on that. I mean, it is kind of crazy what is available on the internet, and with these kids.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, just wait for AI and pornography. That's going to be very interesting.
oh jeez.
Well, we each have the virtual reality sets that are, man, pretty amazing, and these are kind of at the basic levels. I mean, and years old, but can reiterate why is it a big deal if the generation isn't having a lot of kids? Doesn't that mean that maybe they'll be a little more financially secure?
No. But the best example would be, you see, China didn't need pornography to do this or to cut their population. What they did was they made it a federal mandate, and they went from having 6 kids to 1, which is why they're missing 500 million people under 40. So what happened when the couple would have 1 child, but they wanted to work, and there was lots of opportunity. So they gave the child to their in-laws, to their parents, and both the husband and wife went into the city and worked for 25 cents an hour. And that would be a good number, 25 cents an hour in the, around that time, 80s and 90s. China doubled its labor. They absolutely doubled its labor. And they doubled cheap labor, which is why they became they made everything in Walmart, everything. But what's happening now is their economy is going to collapse, and they're going to have an overabundance of old people who cannot be supported by workers because there aren't workers. And that's the problem. And it's very serious. What is going to businesses, I came out of the retail field. Retail businesses know how to expand. Retail businesses don't have a clue about how to shrink. Can't do it. You go out of business. So that's what we're going to see. It's a serious issue. And it's called depopulation.
Great. Two things that come to my mind there. One is that was an example of kind of an international perspective, a country's collapsing. Two questions from that is, one is, are there countries out there that are thriving or in a position to prosper? And then secondarily, you mentioned manufacturing or their labor in China. For years, they've kind of been the go-to. Where does that go? Where do you see that going?
America's. It's the only place it can go. It can't go to the EU because the EU has the same problem as everybody else. The only nation in the world, major nation in the world that's having kids is the U.S. right now.
The only nation
that has substantial population,
yeah,
working age. Now the population under 20 is, we're kind of watching that closely. We don't know where they're going to go, what they're going to do. But the United States, Canada, Mexico, Central and South America are going to flourish. Mexico is going to explode. Mexico has perfect demography, perfect. They have the perfect number of kids. They have the perfect amount of labor. They have the perfect amount of providers. They have the perfect amount of elderly to be cared for by family. It's perfect. So manufacturing is going to come to United States, Canada, but watch Mexico, big time.
Well, you mentioned perfect. What is perfect? What do you mean by that? And how did they get to that state, right? Is that like equal generations, or what does that look like?
Populations are visually pyramids. They're like this. The very top are the very elderly that are dying, and the very bottom are the babies that are being born. So it's a pyramid.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's what Mexico has. Mexico has a perfect pyramid. If you looked at the United States, our pyramid is a little rocky at the bottom. If you looked at China, it caves in. If you look at Russia, it caves in. If you look at Italy, it caves in. If you look at France, if you look at Germany, caves in. No kids, no kids, no kids. We're having kids. The majority, a huge part of our population is being augmented by Latinos, and God bless them.
Great. I love it. The other question I had there was, I thought of immigration, right? Does it matter if it's legal or illegal, or just, hey, we just need more people to show up? It doesn't matter.
No, I'm not going to go there because, I certainly don't want to bring in criminals. But we have a fair number of criminals right here, and I'll give you some numbers that'll curl your hair.
Be careful, Ken. With Cameron's hair is like a huge important. If you mess that up, Ken,
it's spot on today too, Ken.
Yeah, it is spot on.
Yeah. Here's some numbers for you, and these are kind of freaky. Between the ages of 25 and 55 in the United States, we have about 120 million people total. That's our labor force, 25 to 55. Okay. That's labor. And we have a fair amount of it. Of that group, half of them are women. True. Okay. So we'll take the women out of the package because we're going to talk about being a felon, and women don't commit crime. Women are 10 times less likely to commit a crime than a man. And which is something that organizations should take into consideration when they hire a CFO. Big time.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Well, now we have 60 million men, right?
Yeah.
Okay, 60 million men. What percentage of that 60 million are felons, have been in jail for at least 1 year, and are either unemployed or underemployed? You want to take a guess?
I would hope 3. I mean, that's 3%. I mean,
I
No, it's
feel like
20.
there's what?
Here, let me help you out. No, you're
That's
going the wrong way.
gonna
It's
say
it's
10.
33%. It's 20 million, and we have 20 million felons that are unemployed or underemployed in our sweet spot for labor. That's a problem for us. And in fact, talking to truckers yesterday, they don't have enough drivers. So I'm trying to persuade the trucking industry to hire felons, because a lot of the organizations are, like, uh, trucking organizations already do hire felons. Now, look, we're not done yet. Of the 20 million felons, how do they break out? It's 1/2 or 10 million African American, 25% Latino, 25% white. So of the, and this is something I tell my audiences. I said, listen, we've wiped out a culture. The number of African American men literally that exist between 25 and 55 is about 10 million. So it's all of them. And so it's absolutely tragic what we have done to that culture. And I believe we have done it, and we need to fix it.
Is that what is that? Is that violent crime? Is that drugs? What is it?
Yeah, it's crime. It's crime where you do at least a year in jail. And the recidivism among felons is like a spinning door. You go in and out, in and out, in and out, so nonstop.
Ken, I noticed that there wasn't any Asians in that
Very
breakdown that you gave,
Yeah.
or any other minorities. I just found that was interesting. Or is it just a smaller number? But
Smaller number. Yeah, there's certainly Asians in jail.
yeah.
So okay, so I've got a couple clients that are truck drivers,
Felons?
right? No, I was thinking of one in particular, and I just had a conversation with him in the last 6 months. Had a nice business that was built up, truck driving. Had a couple guys that were working for him, and it feels like in the last year the business has slowed down considerably and almost come to a grinding halt. Is that an overall trend, or is that more of a micro effect wherever he's at?
No, it's not micro. A lot of people after COVID way overbought, and their inventories are high. So you're just dealing with an inventory situation. And as soon as that inventory dwindles, the trucker's going to have all the business they ever dreamed of, and they're going to have all the drivers they ever dreamed of too, because I believe that Gen Z is going to supply them with drivers.
Now, Ken, let's talk a little bit about the real estate market. You had shared some great insight last time, really kind of how things were shifting more in the regions. But let's start with something that you said earlier about like 08 was kind of like a big impact in the housing market overall. Where do you see the housing market from 2008 to going forward?
Well, I'll give you an example of like 2015 going forward. We're about 25 million housing units short of our needs. You see, the generation born 85 to 2004, Generation Y millennials, was an unusual generation, big generation. Remember, now augmented by Latinos. But let's just talk about the white kids. The white kids lived with their parents 10 years longer than anybody, and they took adulthood from early 20s to early 30s. And I know you've seen that.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting married late. They're buying houses late. Everything is late, but they are moving out of their parents' basements. They are throwing away all those trophies they didn't deserve, and they're moving on. So housing is going to be a spike, and it's not going to give up till further notice, probably another 10, 15 years. And I'm talking about new houses, and one of the things I encourage my clients to do is to invest in multifamily housing, and because that's very important.
I was thinking of the migration kind of theme there. Any areas specific in the U.S. that stand out to you as far as multifamily markets that you might identify?
Well, any of the southern states, because most of our Latinos are from like California over to Texas. That's where the bulk of the numbers of Latinos are, but they're moving up. They're actually moving into Chicago. But yeah, the multifamily housing for people that are socioeconomically new to our country, they're going to need multifamily housing. Multifamily housing too for young people, even young marrieds, is going to be critical. I live in Florida. Florida's population is about 24 million. It should go to 35 million in the next 10, 15 years as the peak of the baby boomers find their way down here, and they haven't yet. The peak of the baby boomers are not here yet. And they were born 57, 58, 59, 60, 61. And there's a ton of them. Once they get down here, things are going to change. But the problem we have is, where do we put the labor? Where did a house, in the average house in where I live is, I mean, even a modest house is $1 million. So that's going to be an issue.
Now, why are we so short on housing?
Because you had two of the largest parts of our population were living under one roof, and one is moving out, and they're not going to live in their cars. Yeah, well, and not only that, you see, baby boomers. I'm a baby boomer. You know what I don't have on my punch list? Dying. And I hear it. So, and baby boomers are roughly 60 to 80 right now. Healthcare is exploding, and it will explode. I really believe we're going to beat heart disease and cancer because of the baby boomers. Baby boomers have about $100 trillion in assets. And I think a lot of that's going to go to healthcare and research. So baby boomers are still living in their houses. Their kids are gone. They've got to live somewhere. And that's a huge number. So we need a ton of housing, millions and millions and millions. And I don't see it stopping, because I don't see any alternative to anything but structure. You need structure. You got a population of 88 million. What are they going to do? Live in tents?
Small houses.
You've talked about migration. Where do you see the population? Is there going to be, I mean, we hear it on the news, a lot of people are moving out of California. They're going to Texas, Florida, and Nevada, and people in New York are moving out. Where are you expecting to see this to settle?
Well, because of the boomers, and because we're going to be a nation of Floridas. Literally, we'll be a nation of Floridas. Any place warm. So, California, I don't think the seniors are going to move out of California. We know there's a migration from California to Texas, but the states with the biggest population are, California has 40 million, Texas has 30 million, and I believe Florida's next with the 20, 25 million. You're going to see a lot of people moving to warmer places. And because the bulk of those consumers are moving to warmer places, you're going to find labor following them. So you're going to see everything from Virginia, the Carolinas, Georgia are all going to flourish. They'll be fine. And Florida, of course, is going to be very, very big as well. And then all the Gulf states and Texas is going to be fine. Utah will be fine because of LDS.
Yeah.
What about New York or even Michigan? I mean,
their populations, I believe, are going to shrink a bit. So, and there are states that have lost populations, and they've had to cut the number of congressmen. I can't think of them offhand, but they exist.
Yeah. What about thoughts on inflation? Outside of them just dropping money,
scary,
printing money like crazy. Yeah. What does the labor market or demographics have to do with that?
Demographics has a ton to do with it, because right now, if you have 30% of the stuff in the world, is made in China, and like maybe 50% of the stuff in the world is made in Southeast Asia, where the top hourly wage is $5. What do you think is going to happen when you bring it here and the top wage is $25? So yeah, you're going to see inflation, and inflation will take on new dimensions.
Great. Ken, are there any good books that you've read lately? What any book recommendations that come to mind?
Say again, recommendations
for books. What books do you like? What do you read?
Anything, a guy that you want to read is Dr. Nicholas Eberstadt. And Eberstadt is one of the most renowned demographers on the planet. I believe he's the State Department demographer. Happens to be an acquaintance / friend of mine, and we compare notes. He has written a book called Men Without Work, or read anything that he's written, and he's good. Also, I like Elon Musk. See, Elon Musk steals my stuff.
Does he?
But I don't care because I've tried to talk to him, but he just won't listen. But
how so? Give us an example.
Well, I can't get through to him. He won't take my call. But he is, I've been talking about depopulation of the world for over 25 years, and he's been talking about it for 2. So I think he stole my stuff.
Well, no, because I remember there was a lot of talk about overpopulation, and that was the narrative. And he was the first one that said, "Wait a minute." He was saying the exact opposite.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
it is. I still run into the people that say, "Nah, we got to cut our population because we pollute too much, and there's too much stuff going into the environment, and it's going to wipe out our weather." You don't need to worry about that because the population of the Earth right now is about 8 and change billion. It'll go to 10 around 2050, 2060, and then it will reverse, and then it's going to shrink, and it will nosedive. Because you have literally 75% of the population of the world is not reproducing. Just sub-Saharan Africa.
What year did you say we would start seeing a decline?
2050, 2060.
Okay.
We're dead. Well, I
don't know about we, Ken. Not this young buck here. Ken, I would like to ask you that I enjoyed your newsletter. Like, there was some good information on there. Do you mind explaining what we could find in your newsletter?
Well, what you find is stories about. My last newsletter was about firemen, because I worked. Remember that? And I was working with we can't find firemen now, and we can't find police, and it is what it is. And so I asked them what their problems were, and one of the big problems that the firemen have is they're not paid enough, and neither are police. You're not going to get somebody to get in front of a bullet for $50,000 a year, and so I think inflation. Yeah, we're going to see inflation, and if we want these people to have families and houses, we're going to have to pay them $100,000 or better, and so that's very, very critical, and we have to make the civil service, like being a fireman, better in a lot of ways. And there are things that we can do. And so we need to do it. We need to enhance the prestige of the position by, in real ways. And plus we need them. Well, one of the beauties here is as the number of young people diminish, listen to this. Who commits crime? 75% of the crime in the world is committed by young men, like 15 to 30. That shrinks, crime goes down, period. So, yeah.
It's an easy solution. Stop having babies, lower crime rate.
Yeah.
Ken, there's also another newsletter in there that I thought was interesting. You referenced, I think, Russia in there. Do you mind sharing that?
Give me a hint.
Maybe it wasn't in the newsletter, but I was prepping. Maybe it was another newsletter, but you were talking about the impact of the amount of soldiers lost and the amount of people that have, I think you said a million
Yeah.
people moved out of Russia.
Russia, about, I don't know, 15 years ago, I was in my presentations, and I speak 20, 30 times a year. I told folks, I said, listen, Russia is going to want to pick up some population someplace. I don't know where. And I said, but Ukraine seems like, it's in the crosshairs. And it was. And people, it freaked people out because I get a lot of emails and they said, how did you know about Ukraine 10 years ago? And I said, well, it's simple. Russia's population is shrinking. Russia's population is old, sick, and drunk. The average age men die in Russia is 57. 57.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 57.
Dang,
So,
almost, then you're not Russian.
so,
It's Russian.
So what's going to happen with Russia? Russia charges into this war, and because their military sucks and doesn't have the right equipment, they lose 300,000 men. 300,000 men. That's a lot of men. And 1 million men abandon the country because they don't want to be drafted. So now Putin has a serious issue. And so, people think, well, Russia, we're going to go to war with Russia. We would squash Russia in about a day and a half. They would have no opportunity whatsoever against us or against NATO. They just wouldn't. So
awesome. I love it. Go USA.
Yeah.
Wrap it up. Yeah. Ken is right. If somebody's out there, they're listening and they want more information, or if they want to go out there and book you as a keynote speaker, right? I've got kgcdirect.com to send them to. Perfect. Is that the right spot?
That's the right spot. In fact, and like I said earlier, all you have to do is go to Google and put in Ken Demographer, and kgcdirect.com comes right up. kgcdirect.com. If you want to, you can get my books. You can book me to speak. You can hire us to do research. We've done research for various markets. We've done research for retail. We've done research for real estate. We've done research for all kinds of different odd things that are sold, part of commerce in this country. And the stuff is accurate because it's not opinion. It's not subjectivity. It's numbers. It's not trigonometry or even algebra. It's math, pure math. So,
Ken, I got one or two more questions for you real quick. Last time we were here, you had predicted that Texas was going to go blue. And I think this was before the lockdown. I think we had met. So I'm just curious, what's your forecast going forward?
Well, it will go blue because of two reasons. One, people are bailing out of California. Could any state be more blue? And going to Texas. And two, what we're going to have is we have a conflict right now with the baby boomers who are 60 to 80 and Generation Y millennials that are really 20 to 40. And there's nobody in between to buffer them. There are no moderates. The moderates are you guys that are you're just too small. You're too small a group to buffer those two. We had the same situation back in the late 60s, 70s, and early 80s between big old generations and big young generations. What's going to happen is we have a monster young generation, 170 million people under 40 years old. Young people tend to be liberal. I think we're going to be a liberal country. Period.
Period.
Well, I was going to ask you, because this is the second point I had. We had talked about you were potentially working on a book, or I don't know how deep you were into it, but we had talked about, I think it was Churchill who had said, if you're in your 20s, if you're not a liberal, you don't have a heart. But if you're in your 40s, you're not a conservative, you don't have a brain.
Right.
And I think you were maybe going to try to work on a book on that or something. I don't know. I'd love to hear if there was an update on that.
No, well, there's no update on the book because my book, which is the concept is called the 1 minute marketer, because I'm trying to copy the 1 minute manager. Remember that very successful book?
Yeah.
And it's all about getting in front of markets. But I got a turn down from my publisher who said, life goes on. Books about demography don't sell very well. I mean, there's no.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I mean,
there's not much. There's not much in it that's very spicy. So, but I'm still working on that. But that is absolutely true. Do a spectrum. Do babies, and then elderly people. When you're born and you're a baby, you want what you want when you want it. You want it now. You want it for free. You're a liberal. And then as you grow up and amass stuff that you don't want to share with everybody, you become more and more conservative. So you get the older people at the end of the spectrum are very conservative because they have the wealth and they don't want to share it. Simple as that. Or give it away.
Along those lines, right? Baby boomers, I think you mentioned earlier, $100 trillion in assets.
Yeah.
Right. Well, how do you predict, how do you foresee this transfer of wealth over the next 10, 15 years?
It's going to be the largest transfer of wealth in the history of the world. And it's going to go to a Generation Y millennials. It's going to be an exciting time. You're going to see a lot of big houses. You're going to see a lot of people throw a lot of money around. I mean, $100 trillion is a lot of money. That's a ton. I mean, that's 5 times our GDP, which is around $20 trillion. Yeah, I think that if the baby boomers could buy a nuclear submarine, they'd be the second most powerful nation in the world.
How much does one cost? I don't know what it is. Yeah. Awesome. Ken, thanks so much. Again, if somebody's out there listening, would love more information or to book him as a keynote speaker, guys, go check out kgcdirect.com. We'll make sure we got that in the show notes. Again, thanks, Ken. Thanks for your time.
You guys are the best. Take care.
Go make it a fantastic day.
Take care.